I was still wearing the cranberry-stained apron when my husband told me to apologize or leave. He did not say it privately. He did not ask me to step outside. He said it at his parents' Thanksgiving table in front of his mother, his father, his brother, his sister-in-law, and every relative who had spent the evening pretending not to hear me being picked apart. "Apologize to my mother," Colin said, his voice flat and cold, "or pack your things and get out." Every face turned toward me. They expected tears. They expected surrender. They expected the same quiet wife who had swallowed humiliation for 6 years. So I stood up, wiped my hands, smoothed my dress, and gave him the word he wanted. Okay. Colin thought okay meant I had lost. He did not know it was a countdown. By midnight, I had 2 suitcases in the trunk, my 5-year-old son asleep in my arms, and 2 one-way tickets booked to a country Colin had never cared enough to learn about. By morning, his family's phones would not stop ringing because I had already sent them the recording they had spent years teaching me to keep buried. My name is Marissa Hale, and this is the story of how one Thanksgiving dinner ended my marriage, exposed my husband's financial lies, and finally taught me that silence is only noble when it protects peace. When silence protects abuse, it becomes a cage. 3 years before that night, I would have told anyone I had a stable life. I was 32, a senior compliance analyst in Cincinnati, married to Colin Mercer, a medical equipment salesman with a charming smile and a talent for turning every missing dollar into a reasonable explanation. We had a son named Theo, 5 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs and dump trucks. On paper, our life looked ordinary. In reality, I was the one holding it together. I paid bills, tracked expenses, handled preschool tuition, and color-coded our budget every month. Colin's commissions went up and down, so I tried to be patient. When our savings dropped, he blamed a delayed client payment. When his credit card balance climbed, he blamed work travel. When I saw a new watch, he said it was a gift from a customer. I wanted to believe him, so I did. That is the part that still hurts. Not that he lied, but that I kept choosing the easier answer because the harder one meant admitting my marriage was built on fog. But Colin was not the only problem. His mother, Veronica Mercer, disliked me from the beginning. She was elegant, cold, and very good at making insults sound like family concern. At our first barbecue, she looked me up and down and said, "Well, at least she seems ambitious." Everyone laughed. I laughed too because I did not yet understand that some jokes are warnings. From then on, everything I did was wrong. If I worked late, I neglected my family. If I came home early for Theo, I was not serious about my career. If I cooked, she criticized the food. If I ordered takeout, she said Colin had not married a delivery service. If I sent Theo to preschool, I was letting strangers raise him. Colin never defended me. After every dinner, he said, "That's just how Mom is. Don't let it get to you." What he meant was, let her hurt you so I do not have to be uncomfortable. The Mercer family worshipped appearances. Their house sat in a quiet Ohio suburb with polished floors, heavy curtains, and a dining room Veronica treated like a stage. Colin's father, Bernard, sat at the head of every table like a retired judge. His older son, Graham, was the favorite, and Graham's wife, Tessa, was praised constantly because she had quit her job after marriage and never contradicted anyone. I became the family's cautionary tale, the career woman, the difficult wife, the mother who used daycare, the outsider who would not learn her place. For 6 years, I swallowed it because I wanted Theo to have grandparents. I told myself peace mattered more than pride. But peace that requires one person to disappear is not peace. That Thanksgiving, I arrived at Veronica's house with 2 pies a casserole and the foolish hope that maybe this year would be different. Theo ran into the living room to play with his cousins. I stayed in the kitchen for hours, chopping, stirring, carrying trays, and cleaning spills I did not make, while Colin laughed with his brother in the den. Every time I looked through the doorway and saw him comfortable while I moved around his mother's kitchen like unpaid staff, something inside me tightened. At dinner, Veronica waited until everyone's plate was full. She always waited for an audience. "Marissa," she said, smiling sweetly, "is Theo still in that preschool all day? I keep telling Colin a little boy needs his mother, not strangers." The table went quiet. I looked at Colin first. Some old pathetic reflex of hope. He stared at his plate. "Yes," I said. "Theo is in preschool. He is safe, happy, and learning." Veronica sighed. "Children also enjoy candy. That doesn't mean we build their lives around it." "But then you always were more interested in money than motherhood." Heat climbed up my neck. "I work because I need to," I said, "and because I want to." Tessa looked down. Graham smirked into his wine. Veronica leaned forward. "There it is. Always keeping score." Something in me shifted. "I keep score," I said slowly, "because money keeps disappearing whenever no one asks questions." Colin's fork froze. "Marissa," he warned. But I was done being warned. I looked around that polished table at the faces that had judged me for years without asking what I had been carrying. "I pay half our mortgage," I said. "I pay Theo's preschool. Last winter I paid $6,000 of Colin's credit card debt because he said his commission was delayed. And last month our savings account had $212 in it." Veronica's smile vanished. "Maybe if you managed your home as carefully as your office." "I do manage it," I said. "That is how I know the numbers do not make sense." Colin stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "That's enough." I looked at him and saw fear behind the anger. Not embarrassment, fear. That told me I had been right. So I said what I had held in for months. Ask him about the personal loan in both our names. Ask him who signed my name to documents I never saw. Ask him why $10,000 my father gave us for roof repairs went into a trading account instead. The room went still. Veronica's mouth opened. Bernard's eyes snapped toward Colin. Graham stopped smirking. Colin's face turned red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about." "Apologize," he snapped. I stared at him. He leaned forward, voice lower and uglier. "Apologize to my mother for causing a scene or pack your things and leave." That was the moment. Because Theo was in the next room asleep on the couch with his toy truck tucked under his arm, and Colin was teaching him that a woman should be punished for telling the truth. I could not let that be the lesson my son inherited. So I stood and said, "Okay." Colin stayed at his parents' house that night. He said he needed time to think. I knew what that meant. He needed his mother to tell him he was right. He needed his family to rebuild the lie around him by morning. I drove home alone with Theo asleep in the back seat. For 20 minutes, I cried so hard I had to pull over at a gas station outside Dayton. Then the crying stopped. Not because the pain was gone, but because clarity had arrived. I had not been merely angry at that table. I had been ready. For 4 months, I had been collecting evidence. It started with a missing $480, then another missing amount, then a paycheck that never reached our joint account. I am a compliance analyst. Numbers do not lie to me the way frightened men do, so I saved everything. Bank statements, screenshots, loan documents, late mortgage notices, trading alerts, text messages where Colin promised explanations and delivered fog. I created a folder on my laptop called Recipe Notes because I knew he would never open anything with that name. Inside that folder was the truth of my marriage. Colin had taken $10,000 from my father, claiming we needed urgent roof repairs after a storm. There had been no urgent repairs. Most of the money went into a risky options trading account that lost nearly 70% in 3 months. He had opened a personal loan using both our names. My signature was on it, but I had never signed. A document examiner my attorney later hired would confirm what I already knew. The signature had been copied and altered from an old mortgage form. And then there was the recorder. Ohio is a one-party consent state. I could legally record conversations I participated in. I had started keeping a small recorder in my purse because Colin had a habit of saying cruel things and later insisting I had misunderstood. At first, I recorded to prove my own reality to myself. Thanksgiving dinner was recorded too. Every word. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I was not a woman running from a bad night. I was a woman holding the final piece of evidence. I packed quietly. 2 suitcases, Theo's passport, my passport, birth certificates, insurance cards. The emergency cash my grandmother had given me years earlier with one sentence I never forgot. Every woman should have a door only she knows how to open. At 12:43 a.m., I booked 2 one-way tickets to Porto, Portugal. I did not leave the country to hide. I left because I needed distance. I needed air. I needed a place where Veronica could not knock on my door at sunrise, where Colin could not stand in my kitchen and make me doubt documents I had collected with my own hands. Before boarding, I sent one email to my attorney, Dana Whitmore. I had hired her quietly 2 months earlier after finding the forged loan. Attached were the Thanksgiving recording 4 months of financial record screenshots, the forged signature report trading account statements, and a drafted divorce petition citing financial deception and forged documents. Then I sent one more email. This one went to Veronica. No anger, no speech. Just the audio file from Thanksgiving dinner and one sentence. You wanted everyone to know what kind of wife I am. Now everyone can hear what kind of family you are. By the time her first call came through, Theo and I were in the air. He slept against my shoulder over the Atlantic while the Mercer family woke up to the sound of their own voices destroying them. Within 48 hours, everything moved. First, Dana filed the divorce petition and alerted the bank to the forged loan. Once the signature analysis was submitted, the bank opened a fraud review. Colin's name became attached to something he could not laugh off as a misunderstanding. Second, my father learned the truth. I called him from a small rented apartment in Porto with white walls, blue tile, and a balcony above a narrow street. I told him the $10,000 had not repaired a roof. I told him most of it was gambled away. I expected anger. Instead, there was silence. My father was a quiet high school history teacher, a man who kept receipts in labeled envelopes. When he finally spoke, his voice was painfully calm. Marissa, he said, your mother and I used part of the money we saved for your graduate school to help you two with that house. Did he ever tell you? Number? He had not. That was the moment I understood Colin had not only stolen money. He had stolen pieces of my family's trust and used my silence as the hiding place. My father hired his own attorney. Repayment was no longer a request. It became a legal obligation. Third, Veronica made the mistake of forwarding my email to half the family with a message saying I was unstable. She did not realize the recording was attached. Within an hour, cousins, aunts, uncles, and family friends had heard the whole table. They heard Veronica mock my motherhood. They heard Colin demand an apology. They heard me mention missing savings and a forged loan. They heard finally what I had lived through. Veronica called me 17 times that day. I answered none of them. I was busy buying Theo a small plastic dinosaur near the river, because when a child loses one life overnight, you give him something small and solid to hold. 2 weeks later, Dana called with an update that changed everything again. During the bank's review, investigators found transfers from Colin's trading account to an account connected to his father, Bernard. At first, I thought Bernard had been helping Colin. The truth was worse. Bernard had introduced Colin to the trading platform. He had been moving money from his own retirement accounts into it for years. When losses grew, he encouraged Colin to take bigger risks because men like Bernard would rather double down than admit they are wrong. Then Dana found the second mortgage. Bernard had taken it out against the Mercer family home without Veronica's knowledge. The house Veronica polished like a shrine. The dining room she ruled like a throne room. The front door behind which she judged everyone else's choices. All of it had been quietly leveraged to cover losses she never knew existed. The woman who spent years telling me a good wife should trust her husband learned at 62 what blind trust had cost her. I will not pretend I felt sorry right away. I felt recognition. They had called me disloyal because I asked questions, but their entire life had been collapsing under the weight of men no one dared question. My divorce took 9 months. Courts move slowly even when your life has already run ahead of them, but forged documents change the tone of a courtroom. The bank voided the loan tied to my false signature and pursued its own fraud process. Colin was ordered to repay my father in full with interest through a court-enforced schedule. The judge reviewed the Thanksgiving recording as part of the broader pattern of financial deception. Dana told me later that judges remember the tone of a room even when the law focuses on paperwork. I was awarded primary custody of Theo. Colin's visitation remained limited and supervised, while the fraud investigation continued. He tried to argue that I had taken Theo too far away. Dana answered with evidence: the threats, the forged documents, the financial instability, and the fact that every step I took after leaving went through legal counsel. Colin stopped calling me dramatic. He started calling my lawyer. Veronica never apologized. She sent one message through Colin saying she hoped I was proud of breaking a family apart. I read it once, forwarded it to Dana, and deleted it. Because families are not broken by the person who stops pretending. They are broken by the people who made pretending necessary. A year after Thanksgiving, I was still in Portugal. Theo attended a small international school built around a courtyard of orange trees. He learned to say obrigado before he learned to tie his shoes. I kept my job remotely at first, waking before sunrise to match Ohio hours, working from a kitchen table, while the city outside my window came alive. Eventually, I accepted a role with a European compliance firm. For the first time in years, I was building a life that did not require me to shrink at a dinner table. There is a quiet here I did not know existed. Not the suffocating quiet of Veronica's dining room. Not the fearful quiet of watching Colin avoid my eyes. Not the lonely quiet of knowing something was wrong and convincing myself it was easier not to ask. This quiet is different. Theo asleep in the next room. Rain on old stone streets. Coffee cooling beside my laptop. No one waiting for me to apologize for telling the truth. Sometimes I think about that Thanksgiving table. The chandelier. The cranberry sauce. The polished silver. The way everyone looked at me like I was supposed to fold myself smaller to fit inside their comfort. I think about Colin saying apologize or leave, as if those were the only two choices. He forgot something. There is a third choice. You can leave without apologizing, and sometimes that is how you survive. I do not regret the email. I do not regret the recording. I do not regret the flight. I regret only that it took me 6 years to understand that keeping peace with people who benefit from your silence is just another way of helping them hurt you. But I am not angry with the woman I was. She was doing her best with the hope she had. She believed love meant patience. She believed family meant endurance. She believed silence meant strength. And sometimes maybe it does. But the night Colin told me to apologize for the truth, I learned that silence has a limit. Once it breaks, it does not whisper. It screams. So if you are sitting at your own version of that table, swallowing one insult after another because someone taught you that telling the truth would destroy the family, ask yourself this: who is the family really protecting? And if the person who is supposed to stand beside you tells you to apologize for a truth he helped create, would you stay seated? Or would you already be packing your bags?